Dragon Age Inquisition was rated M for mature by the ESRB and contains blood, intense violence, nudity, sexual content, and strong language. Viewer discretion is advised. Hello everyone, my name is Amaronith and I play games for the internet, and today we're playing Dragon Age Inquisition. It's been a couple of episodes, and so I decided it's time for our first Codex reading. We've got quite a bit. Starting with characters. Cassandra Pentaghast. Lord Seeker Lucius, I am fully aware of the intent behind your predecessor's declaration. Lord Seeker Lambert pried the Templars away from Chantry control and led them into an assault upon all mages, for reasons you both find justified. I, however, am uncertain when the Seekers of Truth went from guarding against injustice to perpetrating it. That's the word. If you truly believe that is not the case, I suggest you look out a window at the chaos this war has caused, and ask yourself if Thedas will recover, even if you are victorious. I remain at Divine Justinia's right hand, and will stay there even if you brand me traitor. I am sorry, but there is too much at stake to swerve from the path we willingly followed at the Chantry's foundation. From a letter by Seeker Cassandra Pentaghast to Lord Seeker Lucius Corrin, Dragon 939. So this is a year before she went finding Varric in Kirkwall. Cullen. Whatever you have heard of Kirkwall's rebellion, the truth is far worse. I would spare you that. What remains of Kirkwall's Templars have been under my command for the past few years. We have done what we could to assist with the city's recovery, to restore some semblance of order. But my time here is done. Seeker Pentaghast has approached me. She wishes to stop the war between mages and Templars. She has been recruiting men and women to the cause and wishes me to oversee the group's military concerns. If the Conclave goes well, then we will not be needed. If not, we stand ready. I have decided to take Seeker Pentaghast's offer. The circles have fallen. I can give no more to the Templar Order, nor it to me. The Maker has shown me a new path. I must take it. Excerpt from a letter sent to Southreach by Commander Cullen. Divine Justinia V. Formerly the revered Mother Dorothea of Orlais, Divine Justinia V rose to power after the death of Divine Beatrix III in the year 934 of the Dragon Age. Little is known of Dorothea's background before she joined the Chantry as an initiate, but she proved to be a liberal and daring thinker, willing to take a former bard and lay sister Leliana as a close advisor. A headstrong devotion to her own agenda and rumored support of the Mage Rebellion earned her no small dislike from the powerful priests long used to controlling access to the divine. In the year 940 of the Dragon Age, Divine Justinia called a summit, intending to negotiate a truce between the Mage Rebellion and the Templars splintered from the Chantry. The Divine Conclave was held at the Temple of Sacred Ashes. Sorry, I had to help the cat. He got stuck. Intending to negotiate a truce between the Mage Rebellion and the Templars splintered from the Chantry. The Divine Conclave was held at the Temple of Sacred Ashes, the most holy place in Thedas. Before a resolution could be reached, a cataclysmic explosion destroyed the Conclave, consumed the temple, rent the sky, and shattered the world's hopes of peace. Oh, I thought this was like a year after Cassandra and Varric. I guess it's just like a few months or whatever. Divine Justinia V perished in the Temple of Sacred Ashes. The Chantry flounders, leaderless in the wake of her death, and its fate grows increasingly uncertain. If order is not restored to Thedas, Justinia V might be remembered as the Chantry's final divine. High Chancellor Roderick. There are some who claim men have no place in the Chantry beyond the lowest rank of scholarly brothers and those who take their place amongst the Templars. It is not true. This is an organization spanning 7 nations, from the smallest village Chantry to the Grand Cathedral in Val Royeaux. It takes more than sermons to keep it alive. There is an invisible army at work ensuring meals are delivered, repairs are made, and faithful attended to, and much of it done by Chantry brothers like myself. The position of High Chancellor places a man beside the Most Holy. I control who is permitted audience, to handle her correspondence, deliver her word to Thedas, and serve as her advisor on matters which may be mundane but cannot be disregarded. If I have influence, let it be said it is something I use sparingly, if at all. This is a task to which I devote myself with solemnity. There we go. I and my fellows bear a burden so that others are free to guide the spirits of Thedas unencumbered. Excerpt from a letter by High Chancellor Varric Tethras. 938 Dragon. Josephine Montilyet. Seeker Cassandra. Josephine Montilyet is a noble from the nation of Antiva. She was educated in Val Royeaux, where she built connections among the court. Once she finished her schooling, at a surprisingly young age, Lady Montilyet became the official diplomat between King Fulgeno of Antiva to Empress Celine of Orlais. The appointment suits her. She is well-traveled, familiar with many forms of etiquette, and by all accounts a skilled negotiator. If that endorsement does not suffice, Josephine is a personal friend. I have faith in her. We require someone both influential and trustworthy to be an ambassador for the Inquisition. You cannot tell me you would prefer to take the job yourself, Sister Leliana. Lavellan of the Dalish. The Dalish are elves who refuse to live in human cities where their people are exploited, having few rights. They choose to eke out an independent existence in the forests, attempting to keep the last remnants of their ancient culture alive. Revis is from Clan Lavellan, a group of Dalish who migrate around the perpetually feuding Free Marches. Revis's people travel along the borders of each city-state's territory, where Free March rulers will be less inclined to attack them, for fear of accidentally provoking neighboring cities. Revis became a hunter at a young age, growing into a respected protector and provider. The recent Mage rebellions disturbed his clan's way of life, as the fighting spilled out into the countryside. Clan Lavellan's leader, Keeper Deshana Istimathoriel Lavellan, chose Revis to spy on the meeting at the Temple of Sacred Ashes between the Divine and the feuding factions, so he could bring back news of the outcome. After the explosion that killed the Divine, Revis was the only survivor. Rumors that the mysterious mark on his hand is a sign of the Maker's favor were spread by those who claim they saw the divine prophet, Andraste herself, lead Lavellan out of the Fade. Leliana. She has many names. Most know her as Sister Leliana, or the Nightingale. Some refuse to speak her name at all, referring to her only as the left hand of the Divine, the shadow behind the sunburst throne. The spymaster Marjolaine trained Leliana from a young age. For years, Leliana was Marjolaine's instrument in the great game of Orlais. While Leliana was devoted to Marjolaine, the reverse was not true. Marjolaine betrayed Leliana and almost succeeded in killing her. Leliana survived the betrayal, thanks to revered Mother Dorothea. Following this betrayal, Leliana spent several years in a cloister in Ferelden, hiding from her past. Inspired by revered Mother Dorothea, Leliana dedicated herself to her faith, discovering peace in a simple life of devotion. But when the 5th Blight began, she received what she believed a vision from the Maker. This prompted her to leave her sanctuary, taking up arms against the Darkspawn. Several years after the defeat of the Archdemon, Leliana received a summons from Dorothea, now Divine Justinia V. She returned to Orlais to become an agent of the Sunburst throne. Justinia perished in the explosion that destroyed the Divine Conclave, and Leliana became a founding member and spymaster of the new Inquisition. Solas. Cassandra. I understand our first order of business must be to investigate the bizarre breach in the sky and protect people from the demons descending. While my search continues, I wish to draw your attention to a new arrival at our camp, an elven apostate calling himself Solas. Solas entered the camp voluntarily, surrendering his staff to Chantry forces without protest. He is not Dalish and says that he has never been part of the Circle, claiming instead to have studied magic peacefully on his own, particularly magic tied to the Fade. While I suspect you will be reluctant to accept the help of an apostate, Solas did come to us freely. Witnesses saw him in a nearby village at the time of the blast, so he was likely not responsible for what happened at the Conclave. However, he has described the effects of the breach in enough detail to convince me that he knows more about the Fade than anyone else present. Solas has requested permission to study the lone survivor in one of the smaller rifts in hope of finding a way to seal the breach. He has correctly guessed that it is growing and believes it will destroy the entire world unless we find a way to stop it. Unless you object, I will allow him his studies, under proper observation, of course. Leliana. Varric Tethras. There's powers in stories. That's all. That's all history is. The best tales, the ones that last, might as well be mine. Varric Tethras of the Dwarven Merchants Guild of Kirkwall is famous, or infamous, for two things: his books and his association with the Champion of Kirkwall. After the Templars and Circles broke away from the Chantry, Divine Justinia V sent her agents to Kirkwall, where the roots of the war began, in search of answers. The champion has long since disappeared, but Varric had written a book on his friend's involvement in the destruction of the Kirkwall Chantry, and the left and right hands of the Divine located him with surprising ease. They captured and interrogated him, and then brought him to the Conclave to give his testimony to the Divine in person, but fate decreed that he would never meet her. And finally, Xenon the Antiquarian. I left the Black Emporium empty-handed for two reasons. First, most of the items were priced far beyond what I could afford. Second, I spent most of my short time there trying to sate my curiosity about its proprietor. I found myself stealing glances at the antiquarian from behind piles of books, between shelves, and at one point over a basket of mismatched socks. There he sat, petrified, in the center of the emporium, skin of a waxy gray over ancient taut sinew, moaning in a voice so dry and brittle it sounded like the snapping of twigs after a drought. A girl of not more than 12 scurried to and fro to fulfill his numerous requests. Another patron noticed my fascination and told me that the girl, most likely an urchin rescued from the street, was responsible for the needs of the antiquarian, feeding, washing, and the like. So impossibly old is he, and so fragile his skin, he can only tolerate the barest whisper of touches from the smallest and most tender of his servants. Only in this way may he come close to his lost youth, said the man. I was surrounded by objects of legend, yet none fascinated me as did the antiquarian. From a journal page found in Kirkwall's Darktown, written by an unknown author. Crafting materials. An army is only as good as its equipment. Fortunately, the landscape is filled with natural resources that can be crafted into items that will give troops an edge. Oh, and for characters, what's a world worth saving without the colorful characters who call it home? This is everything essential about key players helping or hindering the Inquisition. Blood Lotus. Do not try to get out of this. We were told you were the best. That is why you were contracted. Was it not you who obtained the 200 white blooming rose bushes for the Empress's winter ball last year? The Comtesse has been infinitely patient till now, but she doesn't understand why it is so hard to fill the garden pool. She wants no more excuses, and no, she will not compromise with the dawn lotuses. They're white. the flowers have to match the silk canopies. It is crucial. Dark purple, dark red. Do not try to frame this as a safety issue. The guests will be perfectly safe. Why, if they experience any hallucination from the concentration of Lotus essences in the air, I'm certain it will only make the evening more thrilling. I don't care if you have to send someone to some Ferelden peat bog to get it all. Just do it. A note from Chamberlain Laurent to Grand Gardener Umbret Vaucelain over the decorations for Comtesse d'Arnay's summer garden party. According to gossip in Valroyo, the Chamberlain did succeed in convincing Grand Gardener Vaucelain to provide 420 lotus plants. The party was considered by most to be a roaring success, even though the evening concluded with at least 12 guests asleep on the lawn, 3 in the pool, and 1 lady losing several teeth trying to take a bite out of a marble statue of the Comtesse's father, which she was convinced was made of cake. Dragonthorn. The wood of the dragonthorn tree is prized for its strength and has been used to craft bows of remarkable quality, but the leaves are equally valuable. Alchemists have known for centuries that an extract of dragonthorn leaves will enhance and stabilize other, more volatile magical compounds. An excerpt from the Botanical Compendium by Ines Arancia, botanist. Elfroot. Elfroot was first used by the Elves of Arlathan, hence the name. The root gave their medicines particular efficacy, so when the Imperium conquered the Elves, the Magisters adopted its use and its popularity spread to all corners of the Empire. Elfroot is a hardy plant with large green leaves that grows wild in many places. It's so common that it tends to show up in most gardens and fields, almost like a weed. Unlike a weed, however, most people appreciate having access to the wonderful little plant. The roots can be used with very little preparation. Rubbing some of the juice on a wound, for example, will speed up healing and numb pain, and chewing on a slice of root treats minor ailments like indigestion, flatulence, and hoarse throats. There are several varieties, but the most useful for herbalists are the bitter, gossamer, and royal elfroots. An excerpt from the Botanical Compendium by Ines Arancia, botanist. Spindleweed. It is an old country saying that spindleweed grows best for the sorrowful. Verdant spindleweed in a household's garden has often brought neighbors offering consolation, usually without even asking what might be wrong. This originates from the plant's use as a seasoning for dishes meant to speed the recovery of the infirm. A person who grows much of it is likely to be caring for the fatally ill. An excerpt from the Botanical Compendium by Ines Arancia, botanist. Creatures. Thedas is full of weird and wild creatures. Some are dangerous, some are harmless. It's important to be able to tell the difference. Nug. I was sure before the Blight they were a whole lot more rare. Should ask a warden about that if killing archdemons leaves nugs all over. And the poor things don't seem built for anywhere. I mean, they feed on anything, but they blister in the desert and freeze in the snow, and they're easier to track than on your own. Than your own arse. Everything eats them except me. The hands put me off. Yet they thrive. Randy bastards outpace every tooth and claw. Anyway, my point is, the ones around the farm are so inbred they're 5 colors and can't stop peeing. I'm selling them in the capital as elusive eastern bunny pigs. What did Father say about idiots with deep pockets? Excerpt from the private letters of Captain Byron, Lapnug dealer, produced in evidence after 7 claims of water terrors and death following bites in the Garden District, 936. Pride Demon. The most powerful demons yet encountered are the Pride Demons, perhaps because they, among all their kind, most resemble men, as clever and manipulative as the Desire Demon, with a penchant for cruel irony that is almost human. While the demons of desire largely engage in the bribery of mortals, Pride will use mortals' own best nature against them. Clever men outwit themselves, strong men crush themselves, humble men forget themselves, jealous men fear themselves. They turn corruption and ruin into an art. From Beyond the Veil, Spirits and Demons by Enchanter Mirdramel. Ram. The ram is a marvelous creature. Its wool makes the best lining for winter coats this side of the mountains. The horns and bones can be crushed into powder and mixed with the soil for a healthy crop, or charred and ground into ink powder. The hide makes a good cover and a window against the winds. You can burn the dung in a pinch. Melt down its fat for candles. I haven't even mentioned the meat. With a full-grown ram, you could make a stew big enough for a village and have enough left over for a week. So there'll be no more complaining about being paid in sheep for your work during the harvest. With that ram and a few ewes, you can start your own flock. You're lucky to have them handed to you instead of needing to go and tame a wild one. Listen to your father for once. Take care of those animals, and they'll take care of you. Letter from a Ferelden farmer to his son. Shade. It has often been suggested that the only way for a demon to affect the world of the living is by possessing a living or once-living body, but this is not always true. Indeed, a shade is one such creature, a demon in its true form that has adapted to affect the world around it. But my hypothesis is this. We already know that many demons become confused when they pass through the veil into our world. They are unable to tell the living from the dead, the very static nature of our universe being confusing to a creature that is accustomed to a physicality defined entirely by emotion and memory. Most demons seek to seize immediately upon anything they perceive as life, jealously attempting to possess it. But what of those that do not? What of those that encounter no life, or fail to possess a body? What of those that are more cautious by their nature? These demons watch. They lurk. They envy. In time, such a demon will learn to drain the energy from the psyche of those it encounters, just as it did with the Fade. Just as it did in the Fade. God. Once it is drained enough, it has power to manifest and will forever be known as a shade. Such a creature spurns possession. It instead floats as a shadow across its piece of land, preying upon the psyche of any who cross its path. Perhaps it believes itself to still be in the Fade? There is evidence to believe this is so. Wraith. Like wisps, wraiths are sometimes thought to be the remains of spirits or demons that have been destroyed. They cannot shape the fate around themselves, nor are they capable of mimicking forms they see in the minds of dreamers, as many weaker spirits do. Instead, they are the scavengers of the Fade, dwelling in the shadows of stronger beings, feeding on scraps of thought and emotion. From Beyond the Veil, Spirits and Demons by Enchanter Mirdramel. Groups. The organizations and peoples of Thedas are numerous and often draw hard lines to stand behind. Chantry Hierarchy. The Divine is the titular head of the Chantry, although since the schism split the Imperial Chantry into its own factions, there are now two Divines at any one time. One Divine, informally called the White Divine, is a woman housed in the Grand Cathedral in Val Royeaux. The other, known as the Black Divine, is a man housed in the Argent Spire in Minrathous. Neither divine recognizes the existence of the other, and the informal names are considered sacrilegious. No matter the gender, a divine is dressed as Most Holy or Your Perfection. Beneath the rank of divine is the Grand Cleric. Each Grand Cleric presides over numerous chantries and represents the highest religious authority for their region. They travel to Val Royeaux when the College of Clerics convenes, but otherwise remain where they are assigned. All Grand Clerics are addressed as Your Grace. Beneath the Grand Cleric is the Mother, or in the Imperial Chantry, the Father. If a mother is in charge of a particular chantry, Revered is appended to her title. These are the priests responsible for administering to the spiritual well-being of their flock. A mother or revered mother is addressed as Your Reverence. Brothers and sisters form the rank and file of the Chantry and consist of 3 main groups: Affirmed, Initiates, and Clerics. Affirmed are the lay brethren of the Chantry, those regular folk who have turned to the Chantry for succor. Often they are people who have led a difficult or irreligious life and have chosen to go into seclusion, or even orphans and similar unfortunates who were raised into Chantry life. The Affirmed take care of the Chantry and are in turn afforded a life of quiet contemplation, no questions asked. Only those who take vows become initiates. These are men and women in training, whether in academic knowledge or the martial skills of a warrior. All initiates receive an academic education, although only those who seek to become Templars learn how to fight in addition. Clerics are the true academics of the Chantry, those men and women who have dedicated themselves to the pursuit of knowledge. They are often found in Chantry archives, sages presiding over libraries of books and arcane knowledge. The most senior of these clerics, placed in charge of such archives, are given the title Elder, although such a rank is still beneath that of Mother. All other brothers and sisters are addressed simply by noting their title before their name, such as Brother Genitivi, from a guide for ambassadors from Ravane. Founding of the Chantry. Cordillus Dracon, king of the city-state of Orlais, was a man of uncommon ambition. In the year 15 Ancient, the young king began construction of a great temple dedicated to the Maker, and declared that its completion he would not only have that by its completion he would not only have united the warring city-states of the south, he would have brought Andrastian belief to the world. In 3 Ancient, the temple was completed. There, in its heart, Dracon knelt before the eternal flame of Andraste, and was crowned ruler of the Empire of Orlais. His first act as emperor, to declare the Chantry as the established Andrastian religion of the Empire. It took 3 years and several hundred votes before Olessa of Monsamad was elected to lead the new Chantry. Upon her coronation as divine, she took the name Justinia, in honor of the disciple who recorded Andraste's songs. In that moment, the ancient era ended, and the divine age began. From Ferelden, Folklore and History by Sister Petrine, Chantry Scholar. Rebel Mages. Templars sworn to protect all people, including mages, from the harmful effects of magic, have instead persecuted mages with such biased judgment as to worsen the problems they were meant to mitigate, and, whereas the right of tranquility, intended as a tool of last resort to stop uncontrolled mages from hurting themselves or others, has instead been used for punitive and political purposes to silence dissent and inhibit civilized discourse, and, whereas Andraste herself intended the relationship between mage and Templar to be one of practitioner and protector, not prisoner and jailer, and this contract has been broken, leaving mages in fear for their lives from those sworn to protect them. Now, therefore, the Circle of Magi declares the following. We, the mages of Ferelden and Orlais, do hereby dissolve the circles and renounce our sworn submission to the Order of the Templars, effective immediately. We reiterate Andraste's assertion that magic was made to serve man, not rule over him, and state unequivocally that we will use our abilities only to defend ourselves from those who would see us relinquish our lives and freedoms under the presumption of guilt for crimes we have not committed. We condemn those practitioners of magic who, through illness of mind or understandable but misguided anger at those who oppressed them, would use their Maker-given powers to threaten innocent lives, and we pledge to aid any legitimate and impartial government in bringing these lawless apostates to justice. We look earnestly to a future of cooperation between all peoples of Thedas, free from persecution and prejudice, and hope to build a better world alongside all who approach us with friendship instead of fear. Yours in service to Andraste and the Maker, the three mages of Thedas. A leaflet distributed in towns and villages across Orlais and Ferelden. The Dalish Elves. In time, the human empires will crumble. We have seen it happen countless times. Until then, we wait. We keep to the wild borderlands. We raise Hala and build Aravels and present a moving target to the humans around us. We try to keep hold of the old ways, to relearn what was forgotten. We call to the ancient gods, although they do not answer, and have not heard us since before the fall of Arlathan, so that one day they might remember us. Algernon, the eldest of the sun, and he who overthrew his father. Mithal, the protector. Fenharel, the dread wolf. Andruil, the huntress. Valondin, the friend of the dead. Derthamen, the keeper of secrets. Gillanane, the mother of Hala. June, the master of crafts, and Selays, the hearth-keeper. We gather every 10 years for the Arlathven to retell the ancient stories and keep them alive, for when the human kingdoms are gone, we must be ready to teach others what it means to be elves. As told by Gisheril, the keeper of the Ralafarin clan of the Dalish Elves. The Templar Order. End of an accord. Most holy, the Seekers are well aware of the part you played in the rebellion. You call me to the Grand Cathedral in the middle of the night on urgent business, only to speak of trivial matters, and then when I return to the White Spire I discover chaos, and one of your agents in the midst of the apostates. Did you think I would not notice? Did you believe yourself above repercussions for such acts? It was a dark day when the Chantry placed such an incapable woman upon the sunburst throne. I will not stand idle and watch you destroy what ages of tradition and righteousness have built. In the 12th year of the Divine Age, the Navaran Accord was signed. The Seeker of Truth lowered our banner and agreed to serve as the Chantry's right hand, and together we created the Circle of Magi. With the Circle no more, I hereby declare the Accord null and void. Neither the Seekers of Truth nor the Templar Order recognize Chantry authority, and instead we will perform the Maker's work as it was meant to be done, as we see fit. Signed this day on the 40th year of the Dragon Age, Lord Seeker Lambert von Reeves. A letter sent to Divine Justinia from the former Lord Seeker. The Templar Order. Traditional role. Often portrayed as stoic and grim, the Order of Templars was created as the martial arm of the Chantry, armed with the ability to dispel and resist magic in addition to their formidable combat talents. Templars are uniquely qualified to act as both a foil for apostates, mages who refuse to submit to the authority of the Circle, and a first line of defense against the dark power of blood mages and abominations. While mages often resent the Templars as symbols of the Chantry's control over magic, the people of Thedas see them as saviors and holy warriors, champions of all that is good, armed with piety enough to protect the world from the ravages of foul magic. In reality, the Chantry's militant arm looks first for skilled warriors with unshakable faith in the Maker, with a flawless moral center as a secondary concern. Templars must carry out their duty with an emotional distance, and the Order of Templars prefers soldiers with religious fervor and absolute loyalty over paragons of virtue who might question orders when it comes time to make difficult choices. The Templars' power derives from the substance Lyrium, a mineral believed to be the raw element of creation. While mages use Lyrium in their arcane spells and rituals, Templars ingest the primordial mineral to enhance their abilities to resist and dispel magic. Lyrium use is regulated by the Chantry, but some Templars suffer from Lyrium addiction, the effects of which include paranoia, obsession, and dementia. Templars knowingly submit themselves to this treatment in the service of the Order and the Maker. It is this sense of ruthless piety that most frightens mages when they draw the Templars' attention. When the Templars are sent to eliminate a possible blood mage, there is no reasoning with them, and if the Templars are prepared, the mage's magic is all but useless. Driven by their faith, the Templars are one of the most feared and respected forces in Thedas. From Patterns Within Form by Halden, First Enchanter of Starkhaven, 880 Blessed. Oof. History. Only fools ignore the history of the ground they walk and the people they meet. A chant for the departed. The light shall lead her safely through the paths of this world and into the next, For she who trusts in the Maker, fire is her water, and the moth sees light and goes towards the... Fire is her water. As the moth sees light and goes towards flame, she should see fire and go towards light. The veil holds no uncertainty for her, and she will know no fear of death, for the Maker shall be her beacon and her shield, her foundation and her sword. Transfigurations 10:1, often sung by mourners as they light candles. A Study of the Fifth Blight, Volume 1. While some of my contemporaries dispute whether the Fifth Blight was a true blight or merely a large darkspawn resurgence, historians agree that it began in the swamps of the Korcari wilds on the southeastern border of Ferelden in the year of 930 Dragon. King Caelan Theron was swift in responding to the threat, gathering the royal army, every Grey Warden in his country, and sending a call for aid to the Ferelden nobility. The assembled armies laid a trap in the ruins of Ostagar, hoping to crush the force before it reached civilization, but they failed. Darkspawn overran the defenders of Ostagar and decimated the king and his army. They continued their advance into Ferelden unopposed. Only 2 Grey Wardens managed to escape the slaughter, and somehow they came into possession of ancient treaties which compelled the races of men to join arms against the massing horde. The surviving Wardens made their way to Kinloch Hold, home of the Ferelden Circle, and conscripted the mages. In desperation to find more allies, the Wardens journeyed into the Brazilian forest, seeking the Dalish. The Elves, too, joined the growing army. Into the deep roads the surviving Wardens went, searching for Paragon Branca in hopes that she could settle unrest in Orzammar and untie the unite! Gotta love that dyslexia. And unite the dwarves in the battle against the archdemon. Branca could not be located, but another paragon was found, the legendary Caradin, who forged a crown that ended all question of succession. Pyrrell Haramont was crowned king of Orzammar, and the dwarven armies marched for the surface. Despite their successes, though, greater challenges were yet to come. From A Study of the Fifth Blight by Sister Petrine, Chantry Scholar. Andraste, Bride of the Maker. There was once a tiny fishing village on the waking sea that was set upon by the Tevinter Imperium, which enslaved the villagers to be sold in the markets of Minrathous, leaving behind only the old and the infirm. One of the captives was the child Andraste. She was raised in slavery in a foreign land. She escaped, then made the long and treacherous journey back to her homeland alone. She rose from nothing to be the wife of an Alamari warlord. Each day she sang to the gods, asking them to help her people who remained slaves in Tevinter. The false gods of the mountains and the winds did not answer her, but the true god did. The Maker spoke. He showed her all the works of his hands, the Fade, the world, and all the creatures therein. He showed her how men had forgotten him, lavishing devotion upon mute idols and demons, and how he had left them to their fate. But her voice had reached him, and so captivated him that he offered her a place at his side, that she might rule over all creation. That she might rule all of creation. God. But Andraste would not forsake her people. She begged the Maker to return, to save his children from the cruelty of the Imperium. Reluctantly, the Maker agreed to give man another chance. Andraste went back to her husband Maferath and told him all that the Maker had revealed to her. Together they rallied the Alamari and marched forth against the mage lords of the Imperium, and the Maker was with them. The Maker's sword was creation itself, fire and flood, famine and earthquake. Everywhere they went, Andraste sang to the people of the Maker, and they heard her. The ranks of Andraste's followers grew until they were a vast tide washing over the Imperium. When Maferath saw that the people loved Andraste and not him, a worm grew within his heart, gnawing upon it. At last the armies of Andraste and Maferath stood before the very gates of Minrathous, but Andraste was not with them, for Maferath had schemed in secret to hand Andraste over to the Tevinter. For this, the Archon would give Maferath all the lands to the south of the Waking Sea. And so, before all the armies of the Alamari and of Tevinter, Andraste was tied to a stake and burned, while her earthly husband turned his armies aside and did nothing, for his heart had been devoured. But as he watched the pyre, the Archon softened. He took pity on Andraste and drew his sword, and granted her the mercy of a quick death. The Maker wept for his beloved, cursed Maferath, cursed mankind for their betrayal, and turned once again from creation, taking only Andraste with him. And Our Lady sits still at his side, where she still urges him to take pity on his children. From the Sermons of Justinia II. Whoops. Siege equipment in Thedas. Siege weaponry has been used in Thedas for centuries, with primitive equipment used as far back as the Third Blight. Nevertheless, it occupies a particular niche in the tools of warfare due to its requirements. Any armies wishing to produce trebuchets or catapults must be funded and organized well enough to procure both the necessary materials and the military experts to construct them. Throughout history, most armies who fulfilled such requirements did not take advantage of the situation. During the Third Blight, for example, Arlasans and Montsamard constructed catapults to fling flaming debris at the Darkspawn, but the expense of the weapons did not justify the limited damage they caused, and the Darkspawn were ultimately driven back by the Grey Wardens, not siege weaponry. Tevinter forces similarly had the resources to construct siege weapons when attacking the Free Marchers or defending themselves against the exalted marches of the Black Age. Instead, the Imperium focused primarily on the power of its magisters, who were less powerful but more flexible than siege equipment, and who could more easily fall back when the tide of battle turned. As a result, in battles against the Qunari in the Seal Age, generals found to their chagrin that the Great Oxman had left them behind. Qunari black powder is most military experts agree, not magic. It is merely an advanced alchemy that makes their cannons more effective than any trebuchet that could ever be. Nevertheless, there remains hope. As centuries have passed since the Blight and mages are now safely held in circles where they harm none, the experts of Ferelden and Orlais may once again turn their great minds to learning. We need no magic, not where the minds of men survive unfettered. With our resources and our commitment to knowledge, we can easily surpass the brutal Qunari on the field of battle. From Khun, Gurns, and Steel, Military Conflict in a Post-Blight Thedas, written 929 Dragon, shortly before the start of the Fifth Blight. The Conclave. It has been a year of little more than chaos. Yes, the mages voted to dissolve the Circle of Magi, but I will point out this vote came only after increased restrictions were placed on them following the unfortunate events in Kirkwall. What other choice did they have? Yes, the Templar Order abandoned their duties and elected to pursue the mages and bring them back in line, but after 1,000 years in which their sole role was the mages' keepers, what else could one expect? They envisioned the war over quickly, a single battle that would see the mages' resolve crumble, after which they would meekly return to confinement. That did not happen. This conflict could drag on forever with advantage on either side. Both Templars and mages see this, and thus they have agreed to come to the Conclave. This is our chance. Words need to be said which have not been said. A compromise must be reached, because there is no other choice. I believe this with all my heart. I am not without fault in all this. Perhaps I pushed too hard for reform, or not hard enough. The Maker has seen fit to give me another chance. I will not squander it. The Temple of Sacred Ashes is where together we will make history, and with luck we will be remembered kindly for it. From the Journals of Divine Justinia V, Dragon 941. Okay, so this is a year after Cassandra interrogated Varric. Okay. The First Inquisition. The birth of the Chantry took place more than 9 ages ago. The mists of time have obscured once well-known facts. It is commonly believed the Chantry alone created the Templars and the Circle of Magi. Few recall there ever was an Inquisition. Those who do believe it predated the Chantry, hunting cultists and mages in a reign of terror ending only upon its transformation into the Templar Order. This is not quite the truth. One must keep in mind the state of Thedas prior to the Chantry's creation, a world where the only source of order, the Tevinter Imperium, had fallen apart. People blamed magic for the death of Andraste, the blight, the terror they saw every day, and not without reason. Abominations and demons rampaged the countryside. No one was safe. Disparate groups of men and women initially formed the Seekers of Truth, determined to re-establish order because no one else would do what was necessary. The truth they sought, the question they tried to answer, was how to restore sanity in a world gone mad. Was theirs a reign of terror? Perhaps. Evidence suggests they were as vigilant in their protection of mages as they were of regular people. When they intervened, they convened an ad hoc trial to determine the guilty party. This even application of justice led to their poor reputation. The Seekers came down against every group at one time or another, their Inquisition gaining notoriety for being on no one's side but their own. They considered themselves good people, however, followers of the Maker's true commandments. This was never more evident than when they laid down their banner in support of the fledgling Chantry. They believed with all their heart that the Templar Order was the answer a desperate Thedas needed in a terrible time. Ultimately, the Inquisition was composed of independent idealists, not Chantry zealots. That is the truth. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, The Travels of a Chantry Scholar by Brother Genetivi. Letters and Notes. An organization as massive as the Inquisition has a way of piling up paper. Letters and notes may include clues or essential information, but they may just be worth reading in what little downtime can be sacrificed. Magic. Across much of Thedas, magic is a power that is feared or reviled, but it often proves useful. The more magic is studied, the better the people wielding it or running from it. The better off the people wielding or running from it. There we go. Red Lyrium. To answer your question, my lord, yes, I have indeed heard of this red lyrium of which you speak. A single piece of it surfaced in the eastern city of Kirkwall, and its influence alone was nearly enough to cause the city's destruction. As near as we can determine, it is regular lyrium that has been somehow corrupted. Those who have touched red lyrium, or even come near it, report that it sings to them, like whispers in the mind that slowly drive them mad. We do not know, however, what might stem from the extended contact with red lyrium. Madness, surely, but would there be physical corruption as well? What would happen if a mage or a Templar used red lyrium as they use regular lyrium? Far more disturbing is the fact that lyrium could be corrupted at all. Treat any red lyrium you encounter as if it were poison. Do not go near it, do not attempt to destroy it, and most importantly, do not attempt to use it. From a partially burned letter by an unknown writer, affixed with the Grey Warden's seal. The Black City. No traveler to the Fade can fail to spot the Black City. It is one of the few constants of that ever-changing place. No matter where one might be, the city is visible, always far off, for it seems that the only rule of geography in the Fade is that all points are equidistant from the Black City. The Chant teaches that the Black City was once the seat of the Maker, from whence he ruled the Fade, left empty when men turned away from him. Dreamers do not go there, nor do spirits. Even the most powerful demons seem to avoid the place. It was golden and beautiful once, so the story goes, until a group of powerful Magister Lords from the Tevinter Imperium devised a means of breaking in. When they did so, their presence defiled the city, turning it black, which was perhaps the least of their worries. From Beyond the Veil, Spirits and Demons by Enchanter Mirdramel. The Breach. What does it mean to pierce the veil, that which separates our world from the realms of dreams and demons? For the average man and woman, it is a frightening thought to consider just how fragile this separation actually is. The veil is not a physical curtain, not a structure limited to a particular place. It is everywhere. It is in their home, in the streets where they walk, in the farmers' fields as well as remote mountain vales, At any moment it could be torn to shreds, allowing demons and other horrors to flood into our world like water through a burst dam. Known lore tells us that small rifts can be sealed. But what about a large one? What if some catastrophic magical event created a rift so large and horrific it weakened the integrity of the veil as a whole? Such a breach would threaten our entire world, turning concerns about occasional demonic intrusion into a charming anecdote compared to the monsters we would then face. If there's anything to be done, any reason we should look at magic with fear, it is for that possibility more than any other. From The True Threat of Magic by Lady Seeker Elandra Vale. Of course, one of Sebastian's family. Vitar. After extensive study of the Canary specimens you kindly provided, I have come to the conclusion that the painted markings on their face and body are not, in fact, solely for a ceremonial purpose, but provide a practical benefit. Oh, I'm certain there is some cultural significance to the patterns and colors they choose, but the Canary do nothing without purpose, yes? They call these markings Vitar, which in their tongue means poison armor. It's called this because the markings are magical in nature and actually harden their skin to an iron-like quality without hindering flexibility, and my analysis says that the paint largely consists of poison. It's mixed with something else, blood, perhaps their own, and that neutralizes the poison, but only for one with Canary physiology. Anyone else would perish almost instantly, which reminds me, I'll kindly require another body slave. The process activates the magical qualities of the poison, which provides the protective effects, almost in the same manner that Lyrium runes do. How this works and whether it can be used for our purposes will require further study, perhaps some live specimens this time? From a letter written by Nemeria Oreganus, apprentice to Magister Varus, Dragon 932. Maps. Not all treasure is stumbled upon. Sometimes there's a map. Places. Nations and regions, cities and villages, landmarks and empty expanses. There are many places in Thedas to call home. A Tale of the Frostbacks. Inside a golden... Look. There we go. Begin. Start from the beginning. Even mountains had a heart once. When the world was young, Korth the Mountain Father kept his throne at the peak of the Belinus, the mountains at the center of the world, from which he could see all the corners of earth and sky. And he saw strong men become weak, brave men grow cowardly, and wise men turn foolish for love. Korth devised a plan that he might never be betrayed by his own heart, by taking it out and hiding it where no soul would ever dare search for it. He sealed it inside a golden cask, buried it in the earth, and raised around it the fiercest mountains the world had ever seen, the Frostbacks, to guard it. But without his heart, the Mountain Father grew cruel. His chest was filled with bitter mountain winds that shrieked and howled like lost souls. Food lost its flavor, music had no sweetness, and he lost all joy in deeds of valor. He sent avalanches and earthquakes to torment the tribes of men. Gods and men rose against him, calling him a tyrant, but with no heart, Korth could not be slain. Soon there were no heroes left, either among men or gods, who would dare challenge Korth. The Lady of the Skies sent the best of her children, the swiftest, the cleverest, and strongest flyers, to scour the mountains for the missing heart, and for a year and a day they searched, but sparrow and raven, vulture and eagle, swift and albatross returned to her with nothing. Then the ptarmigan spoke up and offered to find the god's chief's heart. The other birds laughed, for the ptarmigan is a tiny bird, too humble to soar, which spends half its time hopping along the ground. The lady would not give the little creature her blessing, for the mountains were too fierce even for eagles, but the ptarmigan set out anyway. The little bird traveled deep into the Frostbacks. When she could not fly, she crawled. She hugged the ground and weathered the worst mountain winds, and so made her lonely way to the valley where the heart beat. With all the gods' terrible deeds, the heart was far too heavy for the bird to carry, so she rolled it little by little out of the valley and down a cliff, and when the golden cask struck the earth, it shattered. The heart was full almost to bursting, and the pain of it aroused the mountain god to come see what had happened. When Korth neared his heart, it leapt back into his chest, and he was whole again. Then Hakon Winter's Breath bound Korth's chest with 3 bands of iron and 3 bands of ice, so it could never again escape, and all the remaining gods named the Ptarmigan, honored among even the loftiest eagles. The Ptarmigan, an Avar tale, from Ferelden Folklore and History, by Sister Patrine, Chantry Scholar. Resources found here in the Frostbacks, Elfroot and Iron. Haven. I would like to speak to you of Haven, the village in the Frostbacks, close to the Temple of Sacred Ashes. We are all aware of its past. It was home to the Disciples of Andraste, as they called themselves. Descended from the people who built the temple itself, they had strayed over the years of isolation from their once noble roots to become dragon worshippers. After the hero of Ferelden discovered the Temple of Sacred Ashes, which the disciples guarded jealously, what remained of the cult moved on, and Haven was abandoned to the ice and the snow. I passed through Haven on my pilgrimage to see the Temple of Sacred Ashes. There was a storm, and I took shelter in the hall of Haven's chantry, though they were dusty from neglect. The walls of that lonely place were strong and shielded me from the biting winds. Peace came upon me. My eyes were opened to Haven's incredible beauty. It could not be overcome by the pain and the horror of the past. It would not be masked by decay and disuse. It would not be forgotten. Haven is precious to Orlais, to the Chantry, and to the Sunburst Throne for its historical and religious significance. It is my will that Haven be restored, redirected to the service of the Andraste, and preserved for the ages. Let it be a sanctuary for the pilgrims who seek out the Temple of Sacred Ashes. May they rest here beneath the cold, bright skies. May the glory of the Maker be revealed to them as they gaze upon the grey peaks that are the work of his hand. Now and forevermore let this be a haven for the faithful. From a speech by Divine Justinia V in 935 Dragon. I was wondering why she left out the part where it's not so much that the cult moved on, is that Varric killed everyone? Anyway. The Temple of Sacred Ashes, rediscovered. According to legend, the sacred ashes of Andraste were carried out of the Emporium by Havard, disciple of Our Lady. Wounded by Tevinter soldiers when he tried to stop Andraste's capture, Havard was too late in coming to Minrathous to stop the execution. All he found was her ashes, left out in the elements. As soon as Havard touched them, Andraste appeared in a vision. "Whoop. Rise," she said. "Aegis of Faith, the Maker shall never forget you so long as I remember." The Aegis of Faith, so named by our prophet herself, stood at her word and found his wounds healed and his spirit renewed. He gathered the ashes of Andraste and returned to the lands of the Alamari tribes, which are now Ferelden. It's said that Andraste's song led him to a holy site, where Havard and his followers built a temple to house her remains. There the legend ends. For centuries men searched for the Temple of Sacred Ashes, finding only rumors and tall tales. Chantry scholars concluded that there was no temple, there were no sacred ashes. It was all a myth, allegory, intended to inspire and feed the fire of faith. Then the hero of Ferelden came, seeking to cure a dying Arl with the miraculous powers of the ashes. The hero, with the help of renowned scholar Brother Ferdinand Genetivi, traced the steps of the ancients and came to a remote ruin high in the Frostback Mountains. There the urn of sacred ashes waited, as legend said it would. After the triumph of the righteous over the fifth blight, the temple's discovery was shared with the world. Much to our dismay, however, by the time our soldiers arrived at the temple, the urn had disappeared. To this day we do not know who took them or why. All that is certain is that it was the Maker's will. The hero of Ferelden did not share the discovery with the world. and Brother Genetivi, whose research made it possible, had disappeared without a trace. Truth, however, will always come out, and rumors circulated about the cause of Arl Eamon Goren's miraculous recovery. Agents of the Chantry investigated the claims about the urn of sacred ashes and were eventually led, as the hero had been led, to the temple. By the time our soldiers reached it, however, the urn was nowhere to be found. But yes, okay. Though the ashes were gone, the temple itself stood, and it has since become a source of hope for the faithful. If the Grand Cathedral is the beating heart of our Chantry, then the Temple of Sacred Ashes is her soul. Here we honor the Chantry's past, even as we forge bravely into our future. From a lecture delivered by Chantry scholar Mother Clothild at the University of Orlais in 938 Dragon. Oof. Oh, okay. The Black Emporium. It is a myth, of course, nothing more. The tales of a mysterious underground shop run by an immortal, perhaps undead proprietor who peddles impossible and implausible goods have circulated for decades among the Templars. Now and then a zealous or curious knight will go looking for the place to no avail. Stories place the Black Emporium in Kirkwall's Dark Town, the sewers of Val Royeaux, in the back of an empty boathouse in Lomarin, at the top of a tower in Marnes Pell, and hidden beneath the skirts of a giant statue of Andraste in the Murdain. No reputable source has ever found it, and none ever will, because it does not exist. You will, of course, hear the standard justifications. It appears only to the worthy. It appears only to the invited. It is hidden by blood magic. It exists only in the Fade. Rubbish. There is no magic that can hide an entire shop full of trinkets from the eyes of a seeker of truth. And I am not just saying that because I searched for 6 months and didn't find it. Shut up, Tristan. From a letter by Seeker Benedict to Divine Justinia V. The Fade. The study of the Fade is as old as humankind. For so long as men have dreamed, we have walked its twisting paths, sometimes catching a glimpse of the city at its heart. Always as close as our own thoughts, but impossibly separated from our world. The Tevinter Imperium once spent vast fortunes of gold, lyrium, and human slaves in an effort to map the terrain of the Fade, an ultimately futile endeavor. Although portions of it belong to powerful spirits, all of the Fade is in constant flux. The Imperium succeeded in finding the disparate and ever-shifting realms of a dozen demon lords, as well as cataloging a few hundred types of spirits before they were forced to abandon the project. The relationship of dreamers to the Fade is complex. Even when entering the Fade through the use of lyrium, mortals are not able to control or affect it. The spirits who dwell there, however, can, and as the Chantry teaches us, the great flaw of the spirits is that they have neither imagination nor ambition. They create what they see through their sleeping visitors, building elaborate copies of our cities, people, and events, which, like the reflections in a mirror, ultimately lack context or give life of their own. Even the most powerful demons merely plagiarize the worst thoughts and fears of mortals, and build their realms with no other ambition than to taste life. From Tranquility and the Role of the Fade in Human Culture by First Enchanter Josephus. The Hinterlands. My Lord Arl Tegan, I retired to the hinterlands for peace and quiet away from the politics, and because the wide open spaces were perfect to let my horses run. Instead, the war between the mages and the Templars has turned your beautiful hills into a series of burning battlefields. The farmers who live in the hinterlands are good folk. Many of them left Redcliffe village because they couldn't bear to be there anymore, not after the Blight and the Walking Dead left so many bad memories. Now we've got apostates running around, setting fire to anyone who looks at them sideways, and Templars looting houses and cutting down those who protest as mage sympathizers. My wife, Leliana, sent off our field hands to stay with her family in the east, but there are a lot of poor people here with nowhere to go. We get more refugees every day. This village attacked by mad mages, or that farmstead burned to the ground by Templars who can't tell a hoe from a staff. I suppose you're stretched thin, but anything you can do to lessen the burden of these poor folk would be much appreciated. I'll do as I can, and if your men need better mounts, say the word. Best of luck to you, my lord. Remember not to let the Duchess puff out her gut when you saddle her. Remember not to let Duchess puff out her gut when you saddle her. Yours in service, Dennett. A letter from Redcliffe's former horsemaster to Arl Tegan of Redcliffe, undelivered. Resources found here. Elfroot, Spindleweed, Blood Lotus, Crystal Grace, Royal Elfroot, Deep Mushroom, Embrium, Iron, Drakestone, Onyx, and Obsidian. Tales. Stories and songs are windows into the minds of the people. Enchanters. I'm not actually going to be singing these, I'm sorry. The time has come to be alive. With the circle of Magi where we will thrive with our brothers. Enchanters remind that time will not unwind. The dragon's crooked spine will never straighten into line. Our plea will be a faithful end decree where a man will not retreat from the defeat of his fathers. Enchanters, a time has come for battle lines. We will cut these knotted ties, and by some may live, and some may live, and some may die. Enchanter, come to me. Enchanter, come to me. Enchanter, come to see. Canna you come to see? As you once were blind in the light, now you can sing. In our strength we can rely, and history will not repeat. As performed by the bard Meriden Halewell. Maker. Maker, have you left me here, temple, sacred ashes, tragic mark upon our land? Sky fall, let darkness rain on thee. Now flee from the dragon's heart. Warring, battle-scarred eyes, breach into the fade has come. Demon, please spare my life and our sons. As performed by the bard Meriden Halewell. And Andraste's Mabari. You know Andraste's old Mabari. He don't show up in the chant. And if you ask those holy sisters, well, they'll say Andraste can't. Have had no big old smelly war dog, but all Ferelden knows it right. Our sweet lady needed someone who would warm her feet at night. And there's Andraste's Mabari by the holy prophet's side. In the fight against Aventer, that dog would never hide. They say the Maker sent him special, always loyal without pride, so he could be the sworn companion of the Maker's holy bride. Oh, that dog he guards Andraste without arrogance or fear, only asking of his mistress just to scratch behind the ears. But then old Mafrath gets to plottin', tries to lure that dog away, but even as they trap the prophet, her Mabari never strays. And there's Andraste's Mabari by the holy prophet's side. In the fight against Aventer, that dog would never hide. They say the Maker sent him special, always loyal without pride, so he could be the sworn companion of the Maker's holy bride. Oh, they thought the wounds had killed him, but then he limped out toward the fire, and Hesarian he shed a tear as that dog laid on the pyre. And there's Andraste's Mabari by the holy prophet's side. In the fight against Aventer, that dog would never hide. They say the Maker sent him special, always loyal without pride, so he could be the sworn companion of the Maker's holy bride. Yes, that Mabari's the companion of the Maker's holy bride. A popular, if historically unlikely, Ferelden tavern song. Notorious Raider Trash. You want to know about my Raider friends, huh? What in the world would make a goody-goody like you poke your nose in such a dirty business? Well, there's good Sir Thedas, of course. Some people say he runs the Armada. He doesn't. No one does. The Armada is a collection of ships, and each one is like a nation unto itself. Its own rules, its own people, its own leader. Thedas is respected, of course. You don't sink half a dozen Orlesian frigates without earning at least some respect. He's a dangerous man, but he's no king of the Armada. Anyone tells you that, they're lying or misinformed. There's Lachlan Poole. Likes to sail around the southern cape of Ravane, rattling his saber and posturing like it means something. No one really cares what Lachlan Poole does, though only a fool will say that to his face. You see, the thing about Lachlan Poole is he's got gold. Lots of it. All earned through legitimate means, even. He still has a trading company somewhere in the marches, and he hires people to run it while he plays adventurer on the high seas. The Armada lets him do it because it always pays to have friends with coin. The one you should really watch out for is Ianto. They call him the Talon, the terror of Lemarin. But most often that crooked bastard what may kill you in your sleep. Slavery, murder, torture, nothing is too much for Ianto. He'd traffic in souls if he discovered a way to extract them from people. In fact, I'm sure he has some Tevinter cronies working on that right this second. I'm sure there's coin to be made in stolen souls somewhere. The Imperium, probably. Isabella, self-proclaimed Queen of the Eastern Seas. Ah, Isabella, I miss you, my dear. The Children of Andraste. There are many misconceptions regarding Andraste's bloodline, Monsieur. This is due, I should think, to a general lack of knowledge regarding Andraste's mortal life. Understandable, considering the many cults that arose following her death. Everyone sought to claim Our Lady for their own culture or claimed some aspect of her existence was a lie, all of them complete fabrications. My order has done considerable research to ascertain the truth. We all know Andraste and the Betrayer raised 5 children. The eldest 3 were sons, Isarath, Evrion, and Verald. The rule of what was once southern Tevinter was split among them. Isarath was given the west, what is today Orlais. Evrion was given the east, what is today the Free Marches. Verald was given the central plains. Planazine, what is today Navarra. What became of these men and their legacies is the stuff of legend, and the majority of claimants to Andraste's bloodline link back to one of them. None of the 3 sons, however, were born of Andraste. They were born of the betrayer's concubine, Gillivan. People chose to overlook the fact that Andraste came from the Alamari tribesmen, and that they were barbarians, not the Ferelden's we know today. They were savage warriors who took concubines in addition to their wives, and because Andraste was thought to be too weak to bear children, the betrayer took Gillivan to him to provide him heirs, which she did. After her death, her sons were raised as Andraste's own. Later in life, Andraste proved predictions wrong and had 2 daughters by the betrayer, Ebris and Vivial. They were kept out of the public eye and not permitted to marry, though both had consorts. Ebris had but one child, Alevimar, who perished on a voyage to Denerim, less than a month after her mother fell to the plague, and without children of her own. The younger daughter, Vivial, was more controversial, a strong-headed woman who defied her family by falling in love with a mage of Tevinter, Regalan. Vivial and Regalan went into self-imposed exile as the Exalted March began, and into hiding following Andraste's betrayal and murder. What became of Vivial and her descendants is largely unknown for one primary reason. She had only daughters. Each of those daughters only had daughters. They married into other families and took other names, and in the chaos of the Second Blight, all traces of survivors were lost. Andraste's true bloodline, if it exists, lies solely in the descendants of Vivial, and the suspicion of my order is that it produces only daughters. Thus the claims of your young men, monsieur, are highly suspect. From a letter by Sister Galena of the Augustine Order, Dragon 912. The Disciples of Andraste. One moment before I get into it. Ooh. Gotta shift, wiggle, and stretch. Ooh. Spine getting crunchy. Okay. The Disciples of Andraste are unique in all of history. The cult preceded the Chantry and kept itself so hidden and isolated that it actually survived to modern day. The Disciples made their home high in the Frostback Mountains in a village called Haven, which is now a sanctuary for pilgrims of the Chantry. It is understood that the Disciples were descendants of the first followers of Andraste, who brought her ashes to Ferelden and built the temple to house it. Because they had pledged themselves to To the keeping of this Temple of Sacred Ashes, the Disciples of Andraste never left the Frostbacks. For 900 years they kept strangers away, killing all who came close, and were completely oblivious to the world that advanced beyond the boundaries of their home. Having developed separately from the traditions of the Andrastian Chantry, the Disciples were led by revered fathers. However, little else is known about the original beliefs of the Disciples, for they had turned from their noble heritage by the time they were discovered. Almost all scholars believe that the centuries-long isolation imposed on the village led to the necessity for inbreeding. This practice likely led to a greater incidence of madness, which may explain why the cult was, at the time of its discovering in 930, worshipping a high dragon. According to writings discovered in Haven, the Disciples of Andraste showed reverence to the dragon, believing it to be the prophet reborn. The egg clutches and the dragonlings of the dragon were afforded great honor for being Andraste's offspring, and were cared for by the cult. The dragon never attacked the cult, being cunning enough to recognize how this arrangement benefited it. In 930 Dragon, the Disciples were wiped out by the hero Ferelden, who was on a quest to retrieve the sacred ashes of Andraste. From Before Andrastianism, The Forgotten Faiths by Sister Rondwyn of Tenterville. Oops. The Randy Dowager Quarterly, a well-worn quarterly missive of suspect virtue. The Randy Dowager welcomes the cool of autumn with the fall of another, the collective dreams of desire, being the confessions of an apprentice and training more furrowing than harrowing. Forbidden dalliances at their most spirited, the Randy Dowager, exhibitions for the nobles of thought but spry of step. The lady herself says, enchanting. One supports the circles, if only because closed doors offer the imagination more. 3 scarves fluttered in shock out of 5. R.D. The Singing Maiden. Have you ever heard the story of King Bedwyr? Bedwyr, like most kings, was a man of great pride who expected nothing but complete loyalty from his subjects. He believed the best way to achieve this was through fear. After all, those who feared him would never cross him or question his rule. Most importantly, those who feared him would always seek to please him. Bedwyr cultivated terror in his subordinates through the gleeful and unrestrained use of a contraption referred to as the Maiden. The Maiden was a hinged iron casket, and as high and wide and deep as a man, with the vicious spikes within, meant to pierce through the poor soul locked into it. Bedwyr's Maiden was a prized possession and stood in a place of honor in his throne room, often with a screaming victim inside it. Political rivals, suspected assassins, treasonous ministers, the Maiden consumed them all. But as time passed, the more people were given to the Maiden for increasingly trivial offenses. The cook for oversalting the king's food, the page boy for dropping his sword. The Maiden cast a pall over the kingdom, and its people prayed for deliverance from their cruel king. Then one day, a strange woman rode into the city. She called herself Ember, and was an emissary from a far-off land. Her leaders had heard, she said, of Bedwyr's wisdom and authority, and she sought the king's counsel. The thought that he had earned the adulation of brother kings across the sea made Bedwyr swell with pride, and he granted Ember an audience. They dined and danced, and through it all Ember flattered and fawned on the king. At the end of the night Ember asked to see the Maiden, the infamous device that had given Bedwyr all his power. The king, giddy with praise, proudly presented Ember with the empty contraption. Ember looked at the Maiden, sighed with disappointment, and said, "That does not look terrifying at all. I should have imagined the spikes to be much sharper." Bedwyr grew red at her comment and replied, "The spikes are sharp enough. Look at the blood that still clings to them." "But it is so small," said Ember. "Are only children and women its victims?" Bedwyr grew redder still and replied, "Of course not. The Maiden has devoured many men." Ember shook her head and said to the king, "I do not believe it. Surely no warrior could fear this thing. A man like yourself, tall and muscled, would not fit within." The king laughed and saw a way to prove the merit of the Maiden to Ember. "I will show you how easily a man like myself could fit," he said, and with that he stepped into the device. But Ember was waiting, and no sooner had Bedwyr squeezed himself into the iron casket that Ember slammed it shut on him. Ember took the maiden with the screaming Bedwyr inside, through the castle and down into the city, and the people, finally free from the king's tyranny, cheer and dance to the singing that echoed through the streets until Bedwyr was dead, and it finally stopped. A tale often told in the Singing Maiden Tavern. Wow. That's dark. And tutorials. An Inquisition has to start somewhere. But we're not going to read these. And on that note, I'm going to end it here. That is all for the Codex entries. But holy wow, only 4 episodes worth. 4 episodes worth, and this is an hour and a half. Ugh, God, my jaw. Whew. This is gonna be a long one, folks. But until next time, take care of yourselves. Be safe. And I'll see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.